In this video, I'm going to find out if this pink pigment powder, which the makers Culture Hustle claim is the pinkest pink paint in the world, is any good for painting Warhammer models. And I'm going to paint this whole Drukhari Start Collecting box while I'm at it. My name's Guy, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and I haven't made a proper painting video for ages, so it'll be nice to get back to basics. Back in April, I started building the models on live streams. These tiny, naughty space elves are some of the most fiddly, fragile, and surprisingly spiky models that Games Workshop make, so they took a little bit more care than the other, more bulky models I'm used to. The models in this particular box are set to play in my next Warhammer 40k Start Collecting deathmatch, and everything was kind of going to schedule, and then a couple of things happened a little earlier than expected, and hobby time had to take a back seat for a while. So to get this set finished and looking battle report ready, time really is of the essence. I need an eye-catching colour scheme that will look great in the arena while not labouring over every detail for hours and hours. I mean, in my head, I thought that's what I'd done with my Chaos Space Marine army. My Bringers of Decay paint scheme was designed to be fast but effective, and while it looked great on dark backgrounds and in grungy table setups, the dark models just got lost in that rich earth tone of my deathmatch arena. I might as well have just sprayed them black and dry brushed them with a bit of bronzy gold. And while it's tempting to paint the Dark Eldar in deep, moody colour schemes like the box art, I'm just worried that they'll end up looking pretty flat on the battlefield. I want a paint scheme that's big and vibrant to really help them pop visually. And not only that, as I said, it needs to be fast, or we'll never get the next bloody deathmatch game. To get the job done, I'm going to be using a commission painter mentality, mixing clever colour use, purposeful steps that all have a dramatic effect on the final result, and I'm not going to be labouring any fine details. This is all about painting economy. Every brushstroke, every pull of the airbrush trigger has to count. In terms of colour scheme, I decided on pink for one of the main colours, firstly because I'm really into pink on Warhammer models at the moment, but also because Penny bought me this awesome pink pigment powder for Christmas and I've been waiting for the perfect project to use it on. This is made by a company called Culture Hustle, who make loads of cool special effect paints. I actually made a video on Black 3.0, which at the time I recorded it was the blackest acrylic paint on the market. I'll stick a link to that in the description in case you want to check that out afterwards. So if I'm using this insane pink, the true complementary colour to it would be on the cool side of the green spectrum, kind of minty. So I grabbed a few paints that I thought might work, or wanted to try out at least, and grabbed my built and based models. Now let's take a quick look at them, shall we? First up, we've got the HQ unit, the Succubus. Then we've got the Witches. I've split them into 2 squads of 5 to give them some tactical diversity in the upcoming deathmatch. The first squad is pretty basic, but features a Hecatrix made from the spares from the Venom kit, and the other squad is a little bit more fancy. I think we'll be using these as blood brides in the deathmatch, so to distinguish them, each one of these has a meat hook chain thing hanging off their backs, and they all have fancier looking weapons. Also, just a small point, I really like that this kit comes with both male and female torsos, and heads that could be either. We've also got the Venom transport, a pretty big hoverjet thing, and 3 Reaver jet bikes. I'm keeping the 3 Reaver riders and the gunner of the Venom separate to make painting them a little bit easier. These models are all really awkward shapes, but I managed to wedge the vehicles onto a piece of card for easy priming, and the riders also have really awkward shapes to attach to anything, so I used a hobby knife to poke a pilot hole in a place that wouldn't be visible on the final model, and then drilled out a small hole on each one. And the icing on the innuendo cake, I added a dot of superglue onto some unfolded paperclip and stuck the sticky end up inside the rider's holes.
So we're just done with phrasing, right? That's not a thing anymore?
I also used a tiny dot of superglue to attach one of the gunner's feet to a regular base, and that way it'll be easier to snap off later. Now while I'm priming everything, I'm also going to prime one of the spare wings from the Reavers so I can actually test out that pink paint before I use it for real on any of my actual models. Tried and true, good old Halford's grey plastic primer. Yes, car primer, think about it. If people are willing to spray it on their expensive cars, it's probably good enough for your toys. I stuck the spare wing on a stick and gave one side of it a blast with white ink from my airbrush. This way I'll be able to test out 4 things. Brushed on pink paint over the white and grey primers, and also airbrushed pink paint over the white and grey base coats. Time to mix the paint. The lid says you can add just water to create a paint, but I found that using Midwinter Medium instead had better results for a smoother texture when dry, less gummy, a bit more silky. Now what's Midwinter Medium, you ask? That's another video to link in the description, eh? So experiment conducted, and while 2 thin coats of brushed on pink look pretty good over a white base coat, the airbrushed version looks far superior, even after just 2 thin coats. However, I added another 2 very light coats, letting it dry each time before adding a new one, and it looked even more vibrant. And yes, I am using an airbrush in this video, for the 6th or 7th time in 130 videos. As I said, time is of the essence here, and I don't want to be wasting hours brushing on base coats if I don't have to. If you want to use this paint too, as I've shown, you can brush it on for a similar effect. You can really start to see how vibrant this pink is now. The camera is really not able to pick up just how vibrant it is. I think it definitely must be reflecting ultraviolet light or something, because it's quite shocking to the naked eye. Apparently it also reacts crazily under a black light too, so we'll try that out later. For the vehicles, I want the recesses and the undersides to have a rich midnight blue colour, so I grabbed Vallejo's Signal Blue and gave them all a quick base coat. One of the best things about the model air range is that it's already pre-thinned, so if you pour out too much into your airbrush, you can just dump the rest back in the pot when you're done. And there we go, looking pretty slick. I love this colour. But that pink won't cover well over it at all, so to make the colour explode our eyeballs, it's time to add some white pre-shading to the areas I want to be the most vivid pink. So that would be the tips of the wings, and the spiked edges, and any prominent raised curves. I use a big floofy old paintbrush to clean the airbrush nozzle in between very thin coats. Even though white ink is way better for airbrushing than pretty much any other white model acrylic, it still dries out pretty quickly, and it can make your spray pattern a bit messy and sputtery. And there we go. After a few very light coats of white, the vehicles are ready for that insane pink. I mixed the pigment powder with my midwinter medium until it was a very fluid consistency, so that it easily dripped from my brush when it was overloaded. As it's a very wet mix, it would pool easily if I just blasted it on in one coat, so I let each step dry and made multiple very light passes, enriching the pink each time. Here you can see what 1, 2 and 3 coats of this airbrushed pink looks like. The end result is pretty crazy, right? The camera really can't quite decide what to do with it. Okay, the last pass with the airbrush on these flyers is going to be using Vallejo Model Air Red. A deceptively simple name for what I think is a really interesting paint. Here you can see where I've put some on this paper, there's obviously 2 distinct pigments in this. I reckon it's magenta and maybe carmine, which would be perfect to bridge the gap between the crazy pink and this midnight blue. We're going to use this to create a nice fade into the deeper recesses, which will help draw our eye to the sharp pink bits a little bit more. Just one light pass will probably do, and yeah, they're looking pretty tasty. So maximum efficiency always on my mind, I mixed Carroburg Crimson and Drukhari Violet, 2 shade paints from Citadel, to create a complementary wash colour for these vehicles, and used a detail brush to panel line all the little armour plate gaps, and around any sticky out details to bump up the contrast. If you, like me, make mistakes while doing stuff like this, try wiping it away with your finger as soon as you do it. More often than not, everything will be fine, and you can just carry on. If it stains the armour a bit, get a paintbrush that's moist with just water and smush it on the armour panel. Should be no problem. Alright, so that's the main colour of the vehicle sorted. Before we carry on with any details, let's figure out what greens I have that will create the nice minty colour I was talking about before. I reckon basing with Caliban green, enriching the midtone with jade green, and then highlighting with Gauss Blaster green is the way to go here. That way we'll have a complex green that not only looks good on its own, but also really pops against the pink vehicles. So I won't bore you to death with footage of me base coating with Caliban green all over. Here they are, done. Then I sprayed jade green just from above and the sides. Here are those 2 steps next to each other so you can see the difference it makes. And then, as I said, I sprayed Gauss Blaster green just from above and on any raised limbs like running knees or flailing arms. And here's what this step looks like compared to just the Caliban and jade green. Pretty nice, eh? This top-down zenithal style of fast base coating and highlighting is one of the best reasons to get an airbrush, and getting this 3-colour mix on these troops took me about half an hour. I know that a lot of you watching this won't have an airbrush, and I didn't have one until about 4 years ago, but it was watching people using them on YouTube and seeing the creative potential and time-saving abilities that it gives you, it just made me bite the bullet and get one, and I'm really glad I did. If you want some recommendations for a starter airbrush set, I've put a few that I think are decent, and that people I know have bought and love, in the video description. Okay, next step is to tie those colours together a bit, and create some quick recess shading at the same time. I mixed black and green wash together in equal parts with my medium, and then slopped it all over the infantry models. While I'd like to do a mix of skin tones for this army, I'm going to save time here and just use one, and base coat all of the exposed skin with Vallejo's sunny skin tone. So that's the faces, the exposed arms, and some of the models have their tummies out, and most of them have 2 or 3 circular holes in their trousers on the right side too, and also don't forget the little cutouts on the gloves. Once one coat had dried, they were still looking a little bit transparent and green, so I gave all of the skin another coat of sunny skin tone to make the colour stronger. While I waited for that to dry, I gave all of the bases a quick all-over coat of khaki. Going back to that horribly complicated, pretentious paint name, red, I base coated all of the models' flowing locks. Trying to rapid fire all of these base coats, I switched to Vallejo's Old Gold to paint the spiky armour plates on their shoulders and knees, and blades on their weapons, and also some of the small elements on their pistols. I also used this to pick out a couple of details on the vehicles too. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the agonizers, those kinky whips that the Hecatrixes chuck around, so I gave them a coat of signal blue. Because it's quite smooth and a little bit transparent, I actually think it looks really nice with just that, but we'll see what I think when everything's painted up. I also used this colour to paint the saddles of the bikes and the wraps around the banner poles. These models have a lot of grisly trophies on their armour and bones stuck in their hair and skin, so to base coat all of that stuff, I'm using the king of paints.
Pale sand?
Pale sand. Nice. Alright, I know there's quite a lot of you that couldn't quite believe I just primed and painted over that lovely canopy on the Viper, but this build is about speed, and I'm not going to be painting an aircraft interior if I can just paint over it and pretend it doesn't exist. Plus, I get to keep the pilot bits as spares. However, it is time to paint that canopy glass. Using the same palette as the Witch's armour, I base coated with Caliban green, and then applied very thin layers of jade green from the top down, leaving the bottom third pretty much untouched, and then added thin layers of Gauss Blaster green on the top third. And I also tried to draw a little edge highlight around the glass on the top half, although my camera struggled to focus on what I was doing here for some reason, which is probably for the best because you can't see all of the mistakes I was making. Time to make the skin and gold bits look a little bit more interesting. Mixing black wash and flesh wash together should make a pretty decent shade for both areas, and carefully applying so as not to tint the nice green clothes, I went around the skin, hair, weapons, and armour plates. I don't want to waste my fancy model paints on bases though, so I pulled out my big pot of dip wash and I gave all of the bases a liberal coat. If you want to make this cheap wash yourself, I'll put a link in the video description too. So much cross-referencing between my videos these days, huh? I love it. Alright, I think we're getting there. You can definitely see where this thing is going. Not too many steps left now, just a few finishing touches. I dry brushed the bases with, can you guess?
Pale sand.
You're on the ball today. Any light dry brushing that got on their feet, well, that's just dust from the environment. It's intentional. It's a narrative. It's not a mistake. Oh no. I also used some thinned pale sand to highlight the raised and exposed areas of the bones and skulls while I was at it, bringing back that bright, bleached look that has been dulled down by the wash stage. I mixed a bit of dark flesh into pale sand to create a skin highlight colour, and then did a single pass on each model. The focus here isn't to highlight everything, just a few key areas will sell the effect of a highlight at first glance. I'm not submitting these models for a competition, they just need to look good in a battle report. A few choice strokes with a detail brush on their brows, cheekbones, and the top of their bald heads, and following the raised areas of the muscles on their exposed arms, always being careful not to paint into the recesses. And this way we've got at least 3 or 4 colours visible on the skin, with a nice amount of contrast. That hair's looking a bit boring though, so let's add some highlights. First up, I'll mix squid pink into that original red colour to make a rich pink, and do a rough, sketchy highlight layer on the top facing parts of their hair, but also making sure to leave the underside and tucked away bits that deeper red. Then, using just squid pink, I picked out a few strands of hair within those sketched highlight areas. The succubus also has a cool animal pelt thing on her shoulders that I'd kind of forgotten about, so using Mornfang Brown I gave it a quick base coat, and while I had this colour out, and to add a quick bit of visual interest, I also painted all of the infantry's pouches around their waist too. And to complete the midriff accoutrement, I used chainmail paint to colour the little cylindrical things. I'm not sure if they're grenades or stim injectors or something. And once those quick steps were done, I mixed a black and sepia wash with my medium, and then shaded the pelt, pouches and silver cylinders. As a final touch, I also used this shade mix to carefully shade the recesses of the models' faces, specifically in their eye sockets, under their noses, and in the crease of their mouths. I gave the rims of the bases a couple of thin coats of a burnt umber colour, detached the riders from their crotch poles, and glued them onto their mounts. A dab of super glue to hold the flying stems in place, and a blob on top to fix the vehicles to the ball and socket joint. I turned those little plastic cups on their side to stop the bikes tilting forward too much as they dried. And that's it. With brand new twins, still only 8 weeks old as I film this project was probably one of the most interrupted paint jobs I've ever done, but in total I think I only spent about 20 hours painting, so just over 1 hour per model if you consider the riders as separate models to their vehicles. And I'm really happy with how these turned out. I think Culture Hustle's pink has worked really well to make these vehicles really visually striking, and I can't wait to see these Dark Eldar witches go head to head with the Gene Stealer cult in the next Start Collecting deathmatch. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, if you don't want to miss that game. Oh, and let's see what happens when you shine a black light on them, huh? And while I do that, let me give a quick shout out to the channel's latest supporters on Patreon. Pure Vision Painting, Alexander Pines, Iron Banjo 333, Tom Boba, Alcibiades, Quark007, Anthony Castellanata, Zachary Martins, Christopher Shelley, Murph, David Armstrong, Alan Moore, Marcus Persson, Greybeard, James Pretorius, Wee Borby, Sifa, Sergeant's Pursuit, Slayer Miniatures, Chris Vaughan, and Michael Zenner. If you want to join up, get your name shouted out, access to our Discord server, supporter-only polls, stuff like that, follow the... yep, you guessed it, the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.